The secret fit inside a single sentence. I had been carrying it since I was 16 years old, folded small and tight in the part of me that learned early how to keep things from showing on the surface. I had carried it through the last 3 years of high school in a house where silence was safer than honesty. I had carried it into the car on the morning I left. My entire life compressed into a duffel bag and a backpack, $200 in cash folded into the front pocket of my jeans, and a one-way bus ticket to Nashville that I had purchased at the station the week before and hidden inside the cover of a paperback I knew no one in my family would touch. I was 19 years old. I was leaving Beaumont, Texas, and I was not planning to come back. My mother was still asleep when I left. My father was at work by 5:30 and had been since I was small, the kind of man whose presence in the house was primarily structural. He held things up financially, functionally, but did not participate in the warmth of the place. My sister Renata was asleep in the room next to mine, her door closed, the way it had been closed between us for 3 years. I did not leave a note. I had thought about it. I had written 4 different versions of a note over the preceding weeks and thrown all of them away because none of them could contain the full truth, and a partial truth, in my family, had always been more dangerous than silence. I picked up my bags. I walked through the kitchen, which smelled like the coffee my father had made at 5, and the particular staleness of a house that has been closed up all winter. I opened the back door. I stepped outside into the February cold. I did not look back. The secret was this: I was gay. I had known it since I was 14, with the clarity of something that has always been true and is simply waiting for you to find the word for it. I had spent 2 years after that, trying various internal negotiations with the knowledge, telling myself it was a phase, telling myself I was confused, telling myself the particular intensity of what I felt for my best friend Camille in 9th grade was something other than what it was, and by 16 I had run out of negotiations and was simply living with the truth of it in a house where the truth of it was not survivable. My mother was a woman of deep and sincere religious conviction. I do not say this with contempt. She believed what she believed with a consistency and a thoroughness that I had, as a child, admired. She was not a cruel person. She was a person whose love operated within a structure, and the structure did not have space for what I was Uzla's. My father did not discuss such things. Renata, my sister, 4 years older than me, and the family's designated golden child, had made her position known when I was 16 in a conversation I had not initiated and have never forgotten. We had been in the kitchen. She had been reading something on her phone. I had been making a sandwich. She had looked up with the specific expression she reserved for things she found distasteful and said, without preamble, "I know about you and Camille, and if Mom and Dad find out, I'll make sure they know exactly how sick it is." I had stood at the counter with a knife in my hand and a half-made sandwich in front of me and understood, in that moment, that I had 3 years until I was old enough to leave with any reasonable prospect of surviving on my own. I spent those 3 years preparing. I worked every job I could find: babysitting, grocery runs, a Saturday shift at a bakery that paid cash. I saved with the focused determination of someone who knows that money is the distance between captivity and freedom. I applied for a scholarship to a culinary program in Nashville that I had found in a library computer search, because cooking was the one thing I was genuinely good at and the one place in my life where I had always felt like myself. I was accepted at 18. I deferred for 1 year to finish saving. And on the 14th of February, the date was not intentional, but felt, later, like the universe making a point. I got on a bus to Nashville with $200, a scholarship letter, and the secret I had been carrying for 3 years. I did not call home for 6 weeks. When I did, my mother answered, and I told her I was safe and in school, and that I loved her. And she cried and told me to come home, and I said I couldn't, and she asked why, and I said I wasn't ready to explain yet, and she said she would pray for me. I thanked her. I hung up. I did not tell her the secret, not then. Nashville in February is gray and cold and beautiful in the specific way of cities that are in the middle of becoming something. I arrived at the culinary school on a Monday morning with a duffel bag and a backpack and $200 and more fear than I had allowed myself to feel on the bus, because feeling it on the bus would have turned me around. The program was 2 years. Intensive, practical, the kind of training that assumed you were serious because it didn't have time for people who weren't. I was serious. I had been serious about food since I was 8 years old, standing on a step stool in my grandmother's kitchen in Galveston, watching her hands move through the preparation of a meal with a confidence and an attention that felt like prayer. My grandmother had been the one person in my family who knew me, not the secret, specifically, but me, the underneath of me, the real texture of who I was beneath the performance of who I was supposed to be. She had died when I was 15, 1 year before Renata's kitchen ultimatum, and her absence had been, in ways I was still understanding years later, the thing that finally made leaving feel not just possible but necessary. The one person who might have made staying survivable was gone. I threw myself into the program. I worked harder than anyone in my cohort, not because I was the most talented. There were people in that program with gifts that were simply different from mine in kind, but because I understood with my whole body that this was the foundation, and foundations do not get second chances. In my second year, one of my instructors, a woman named Chef Delacroix, who had spent 20 years in professional kitchens before she started teaching, told me during a practicum that I had a palate that could not be taught and hands that could be trained, and that if I wanted to do something real with both, I needed to stop being careful. You cook like someone who's afraid of taking up too much space, she said. Stop that. I thought about that for a long time. I graduated at 21 with the top mark in my cohort and a job offer from a restaurant in East Nashville that had been open for 2 years and was starting to be noticed. I took the job. I started as a line cook. I was not going to be a line cook for long. The years between 21 and 32 were the years I built everything. I will not compress them into a list of accomplishments, because accomplishments listed feel like a resume, and this is not a resume. This is the story of what it costs to build a life from nothing, and what it means when the people who made the nothing call you 31 times in a single afternoon. What I will tell you is the shape of it. I cooked, I learned, I made mistakes that were expensive and corrections that were expensive in different ways, and slowly, with the accumulation of hours and heat and the specific education that only comes from doing a thing thousands of times, I became someone who knew what I was doing. At 24, I became sous chef at a restaurant that was, by then, one of the most talked about in Nashville. The chef owner, a man named Marcus Webb, was brilliant and difficult, and taught me more in 3 years than I had learned in all the years before, mostly by pushing me in directions I found uncomfortable and refusing to accept the version of me that played it safe. At 27, I left Marcus's kitchen and opened my own place. A small restaurant on a side street in East Nashville, 12 tables, an open kitchen, a menu that changed weekly because I was constitutionally incapable of leaving things the same once I understood them well enough to evolve them. I named it February. The date was not accidental. The restaurant was reviewed in the Nashville scene at 3 months. At 6 months, it was reviewed in a national food publication that I will not name here because the writer got 2 things wrong, and I am still annoyed about it. At 1 year, it received its first award, a regional recognition that I received at a ceremony in a hotel ballroom and took home and put on the shelf in my apartment and did not tell my family about because I had not told my family anything in 8 years. At 29, I opened a second location. At 30, I was named in a list of the country's most influential young chefs by a publication that my culinary school instructor sent me a clipping of with a note that said, "I told you to stop being careful." At 31, I appeared on a television program, not a competition, a documentary series about American restaurants, 4 episodes, a camera crew in my kitchen for 6 weeks, my face, my food, my story. Carefully edited, professionally produced, broadcast to an audience of approximately 4 million people over the course of a month. I had told the producers about my family, the whole truth. They had been thoughtful with it. They had not made it the centerpiece of the story. They had let it be one thread in a larger fabric. The leaving at 19, the $200, the scholarship, the years of building. They had let me speak about being gay in the context of why I left and what it had cost and what it had ultimately made possible. And they had done it with the kind of care that I had not expected and was quietly, profoundly grateful for. The series aired in September. My sister called for the first time on a Thursday afternoon in October. She called 31 times. I was in the kitchen at February when the call started. The lunch service had just ended. My sous chef, a 25-year-old named Deja, who was going to be better than me in 3 years, and knew it, was breaking down her station with the efficient focus I had trained her to bring to every task. The prep team was setting up for dinner. The kitchen smelled like stock and citrus, and the particular warmth of a space that has been used hard and well. My phone was in my jacket pocket on the hook by the office door, where I kept it during service. I checked it at 2:15, 31 missed calls, all from the same number. A Texas area code I did not have saved but recognized the way you recognize things you have spent years not looking at. Immediately, involuntarily, with the specific physical response of a body that remembers something the mind has tried to file away. Renata. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Deja appeared in the office doorway. "You good, chef?" "Fine," I said. "Give me 20 minutes." She nodded and left. I sat down in the office chair and looked at 31 missed calls and thought about a kitchen in Beaumont and a knife and a half-made sandwich and a sentence that had been a threat dressed as an observation. "I know about you and Camille. And if Mom and Dad find out, I'll make sure they know exactly how sick it is." I thought about 14 years, the distance of them, the weight of them, the life I had built inside them, real and solid and entirely my own. I thought about 4 million viewers. I thought about what Renata had seen when she typed my name into a search engine and pressed enter. I did not call her back that day. I put my phone in my pocket and went back into the kitchen and ran the dinner service with the focus I brought to every service. Because a kitchen does not pause for personal history, and the discipline of that had always been one of the things I loved most about my work. That night, in my apartment, I sat with the question of what I wanted to do, not what I should do, not what was expected, what I actually wanted. I had spent 19 years in a family that required me to want the right things. I had spent 13 years building a life in which I was, finally and completely, free to want what I actually wanted. I was not going to surrender that freedom in the handling of a phone call, not even this one. What I wanted, I discovered, was not silence. I had done silence. I had done it for 13 years with the discipline of someone who understood that silence was survival. But I was not surviving anymore. I was living, and living required different tools. What I wanted was a conversation on my terms, with my truth already on the table. I called Renata, back the following morning at 9 o'clock. She answered before the first ring had completed. Nora. Her voice was strange, compressed, containing something I could not immediately identify. Renata, I said. A pause. I didn't know, she said. I waited. I saw the documentary. I watched all 4 episodes last night. Another pause, longer. I didn't know you'd built all of that. I didn't know any of it. You didn't ask, I said. I know. The compression in her voice resolved itself into something I recognized after a moment as the sound of a person trying not to cry and not entirely succeeding. I Googled you. Your restaurants, the reviews, the awards. A breath. Nora, I Googled you and I couldn't stop reading. I said nothing. The documentary, she said. What you said about leaving, about why you left. A long pause. I said something to you. When you were 16. In the kitchen. Yes, I said. I've been thinking about it since September. Since the show aired. Her voice cracked along a specific seam. I was 20 years old. I was scared of something I didn't understand, and I took it out on you. And you were 16, and you had to carry that for 3 years in that house. She stopped. And then you left and built something extraordinary, and I've been here for 13 years, not knowing and not asking. I sat with what she was saying. I let it land without immediately managing it, which was new for me, which was something I had been working on in the quiet of my own life for several years. Why 31 times? I said. A small, wet sound that might have been a laugh, because I kept hanging up. I'd dial and then lose my nerve and hang up, and then do it again. A pause. I'm not good at this. No, I said. You're not, I know. I looked out my apartment window. Nashville in October. Amber and gold, the city I had chosen when I was 19, with $200, and a secret and no certainty about anything except that staying would have been the end of me. What do you want, Renata? I said. I want to know you, she said. I want to start over, if that's possible, if you're willing. I thought about what willing meant. It did not mean forgetting. It did not mean the revision of history into something more comfortable. It did not mean pretending the kitchen and the knife and the 16-year-old girl standing at the counter had not existed. It meant something smaller and harder and more real than any of that. It meant choosing, from where I actually stood, what came next. Tell me something, I said. Anything, she said. Did you tell Mom and Dad when you found out at 16? A pause. No, she said. I had not known that. I sat with it for a moment. Why not? I said. Because I was angry, she said slowly. I was angry, and I wanted to scare you. But I wasn't actually going to do it. I was 20, and I was scared, and I said the cruelest thing I could think of, and then you left, and I never got to. She stopped. I never got to take it back. I thought about 3 years of carrying that sentence. 3 years of building my exit around the certainty that she would use it. She hadn't. She had been 20 and scared and cruel in the way that people are cruel, in the way that people are cruel when they encounter something that frightens them and have not yet developed the capacity to be honest about their fear. She had not been innocent, but she had been young, and she had not told them. Okay, I said, a breath on her end. Okay, it doesn't fix anything, I said. I want to be clear about that. I left because the house wasn't safe regardless. I built this life because I had to. Nothing about that changes. I know, she said. But okay, I said. We can talk. My mother called 3 days later. She had seen the documentary too. Her voice was the voice of a woman who has been confronted with a truth she has been orbiting for years without landing on it, and has finally, at 64, decided to land. She did not say she understood. She did not say she approved. She said, I missed 13 years of your life, and I don't want to miss any more of it. I thought about that. I thought about what it meant to be a woman of deep conviction, confronting the place where that conviction had cost her something she could not recover. I'm not asking you to change what you believe, I said. I know, she said. I'm asking you to choose me anyway, I said. The way I am, not a version of me that makes it easier. A long silence. "I choose you," she said. "I should have chosen you a long time ago." I did not cry. I had done my crying in other rooms, in other years, in the privacy of a life I had built specifically so that I would never have to perform my pain for anyone. "Come to Nashville," I said. "In the spring, I'll cook for you." She made a sound that was not quite a word. "Mom," I said. "Yes," she said. "We'll come." My father came too. He sat in my restaurant on a Saturday evening in April, at a table by the window, and ate a meal I had prepared for him with the specific attention I brought to things that mattered. And he said very little, because he was not a man of many words. But at the end of the meal he looked around February, at the 12 tables and the open kitchen and the walls hung with the photographs I had chosen and the menu board that changed every week. And he said, "You built something real." The same words my grandmother would have used. I thought about her hands moving through a kitchen in Galveston. "You made something real, baby." I thought about a step stool and a February morning and $200 and the long, beautiful, difficult distance between then and now. "Yes," I said. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner," he said. I looked at him, my father, who had held things up without participating in their warmth. My father, who had not been cruel and had not been present, and whose absence had been its own kind of shape in my life. "You're here now," I said. He nodded once. We sat in the restaurant as the dinner service moved around us. The kitchen sounds I had built my life inside. The controlled chaos of heat and timing, and the precise collaboration of people who trusted each other enough to work fast. And I watched my parents eat food in the place I had made, and felt something that did not have a clean name, but was in the family of peace. Not the peace of resolution, not the peace of everything being fixed, the peace of a person who built their life on honest ground and is sitting in it, finally, with the people who did not make it easy and came anyway. That kind of peace, the real kind. Renata came the following month. She came alone, without her husband, which told me she had understood that this was not a family event. It was a conversation between two sisters who had not been honest with each other, and were going to try. She sat across from me at a corner table after service, the restaurant empty and quiet around us, and we talked for 3 hours. She told me things I had not known, that she had followed my career from a distance for years, Googling my name periodically, watching the mentions multiply. That she had told herself the distance was my choice, which was partially true and partially the story that let her off the hook. That when the documentary aired and she watched all 4 episodes in one night, she had sat in her car in her driveway afterward for 45 minutes before going inside. I told her things she had not known, what it had been like to carry the secret in that house. What the 3 years after her kitchen ultimatum had felt like. What it had meant to be 19 with $200 on a bus to a city where no one knew me and no one had a version of me they needed me to maintain. What it had felt like to build February. What it felt like to walk into my kitchen every morning and know that every single thing in that room existed because I had made it exist. She listened the way she had not listened when we were young. At the end of the 3 hours, she said, "I want to be your sister, a real one. I don't know how yet, but I want to learn." I looked at her across the table, 32 years old, the same cheekbones, the same eyes, a person I had known my whole life and barely known at all. "Then learn," I said. "I'll give you room to learn. That's more than I deserve," she said. "Probably," I said. She laughed. I laughed too. It was the first time we had laughed together since we were children. It was a real sound. Unguarded, surprised, the kind of laughter that arrives when something unexpected is suddenly and specifically funny. It filled the empty restaurant like light. Last Tuesday, Renata sent me a photograph, a screenshot of a restaurant review she had read. A food writer had described my second location as the most emotionally honest restaurant in Nashville. A place where the food knows something about survival. Below the screenshot, she had written 2 words. That's you. I looked at it for a long time. Then I put my phone in my pocket and walked into my kitchen and started the prep for the evening service. The kitchen smelled like stock and citrus, and the accumulated warmth of 1,000 services in a space I had built from a stick and $200, and the specific freedom of a February morning when I walked out a back door and did not look back. I was 32 years old. I had a life that was entirely, completely, honestly mine. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, the people I came from were beginning to know it. Not because they had made it, because I had. And because I had finally, generously let them in to see.